Lieutenant Maya Torres stepped through the security checkpoint at Nexus 7, the massive space station that served as neutral ground for the Galactic Coalition. The Vrexian Guard, a towering reptilian creature with scales that shimmered under the artificial lights, extended one clawed hand toward her. "Weapon," the guard hissed, his forked tongue flicking between sharp teeth. Maya unholstered her sidearm and placed it on the collection tray. The small plasma pistol looked almost toy-like next to the array of exotic weapons already confiscated from other delegates. Energy rifles, sonic disruptors, molecular blades, all neatly arranged in secure containers. "You humans," another Vrexian guard said with a clicking laugh. "So dependent on your little machines. What will you do now without your toys?" Maya said nothing. She simply picked up her identification badge and walked through the scanner. Behind her, she heard the guards continuing to chuckle to each other in their clicking language. She had heard it all before. To most species in the Coalition, humans were considered technologically clever but physically unremarkable. No natural armor. No venom. No claws or fangs worth mentioning. Just soft skin and blunt nails. The main conference hall stretched out before her like a small arena. Delegates from 40 different species mingled in the central space. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some had wings folded against their backs, while others floated using anti-gravity harnesses. The air smelled of 1,000 different worlds, perfumes and pheromones mixing in a way that the station's filtration system struggled to balance. Maya found her assigned seat near the human delegation. Ambassador Gerald Pierce was already there, reviewing notes on his data pad. He looked up as she approached. "Any trouble at security?" he asked. "Nothing unusual," Maya replied. "The standard comments about humans being harmless without weapons." Gerald shook his head. The Equal Ground Protocol was supposed to promote peace. Instead, it just made some species more arrogant. They don't realize that most of them are just as helpless without their natural advantages. Maya sat down and scanned the room with trained eyes. Years in the Marine Corps had taught her to always check exits, identify potential threats, and maintain situational awareness. 3 exits visible from her position. 2 main doors at opposite ends of the hall, 1 service entrance to her left. Security forces positioned at each entrance, all Vrexian guards carrying stun batons but no firearms per the protocol. Her earpiece crackled to life. It was Colonel Frank Reeves, calling from the Human Security Office 2 levels below. "Torres, we have a situation developing." His voice was low and urgent. Intelligence intercepted chatter about a possible disruption at the summit. Kryn separatist group. They're not happy about the trade agreements being discussed. Maya's posture didn't change, but her awareness sharpened. Details? Not much. Could be a protest, could be something worse. Keep your eyes open. Understood. The conference began with the typical formalities. The coalition chairman, an elderly Quellan with 4 arms and kind eyes, welcomed everyone and began discussing the agenda. Trade routes. Resource sharing agreements. Border disputes in the outer sectors. Maya listened with half her attention while watching the room. Near the center of the hall, a group of Kryn delegates sat in their designated area. The insectoid species were impressive to look at, standing nearly 7 feet tall with chitinous exoskeletons that gleamed like polished metal. Their 4 arms ended in blade-like appendages that could slice through most materials. Compound eyes gave them nearly 360-degree vision. They were natural warriors and they knew it. One of the Kryn delegates, distinguished by red markings on his thorax, noticed Maya looking in their direction. He stood and walked toward the human section with slow, deliberate steps that made his armor plates click together. "The human soldier," he said, his voice like gravel scraping metal. The translation implant in Maya's ear converted his chittering sounds into words she could understand. "I am told your species sends warriors to these peace conferences." "How amusing." Ambassador Pierce started to respond, but Maya raised a hand slightly. She stood to face the Kryn delegate, having to tilt her head back to meet his compound eyes. "I'm here to ensure the safety of my delegation," she said calmly. "Safety?" The Kryn clicked in what might have been laughter. "From what? You have no weapons. Your species has no natural defenses. You are soft and weak. What could you possibly do to ensure anyone's safety?" Several nearby delegates turned to watch the exchange. Maya felt the weight of their attention but kept her expression neutral. "Hopefully nothing," she replied. "These are peace talks after all." The Kryn leaned closer, his mandibles clicking. "If danger came through those doors right now, you would be helpless. Admit it, human. Without your machines, you are nothing." Before Maya could respond, the lights in the conference hall flickered. "What?" Twice. Then the main doors exploded inward with a blast of force that sent Vrection guards flying backward. 3 Kryn warriors rushed through the smoke and debris. They were larger than the delegates, wearing minimal armor but carrying energy blades that hummed with deadly power. The weapons had passed through the scanners because they registered as ceremonial items, but the way these attackers held them made their true purpose clear. "Nobody move," the lead attacker shouted in Coalition standard language. His voice boomed through the hall. "This summit is a betrayal of Kryn sovereignty. We will not allow our people to be sold to human economic interests." Chaos erupted instantly. Delegates screamed and scattered in every direction. Some dove under tables, others ran for the exits. The Vrection security forces were still stunned from the explosion, struggling to recover their weapons. Maya's training took over. While everyone else panicked, she assessed the situation in seconds. 3 attackers. Energy blades effective at close range but requiring direct contact. The Kryn moved with confidence, but their formation was sloppy, driven by aggression rather than tactics. They expected no resistance. The lead attacker grabbed a small Quellan child who had been separated from his parents in the chaos. The child's 4 arms flailed helplessly against the Kryn's armored grip. "Everyone stay back or the child dies," the attacker shouted. Ambassador Pierce stood frozen, his face pale. Around the room, delegates pressed themselves against walls, terrified. The attackers began backing toward a side exit, clearly planning to take hostages. Maya moved forward, placing herself between the attackers and the main group of delegates who were huddled near the back wall. She stood in the open, hands at her sides, seemingly unarmed and vulnerable. The lead Kryn noticed her immediately. His compound eyes focused on her with what might have been amusement. "The human warrior," he clicked. "How brave. How foolish. You have no weapon. What do you think you can do against us?" Maya's voice was steady and cold. "Put the child down and leave. Last chance." All 3 Kryn attackers burst into clicking laughter. The sound echoed through the hall like broken glass. The leader released the child, shoving him toward his parents, clearly confident that this human posed no threat whatsoever. "You want to fight us?" the lead attacker said, raising his blade arms. "Very well. Let us show this summit what happens to weak species who challenge the Kryn." The 3 warriors spread out, forming a loose semicircle around Maya. Their blades hummed with energy. Their armored bodies gleamed under the emergency lights. Maya dropped into a low stance, weight balanced, hands open and ready. "I don't need a weapon," she said quietly. The lead Kryn charged forward with a roar. The lead Kryn warrior rushed toward Maya with terrifying speed. His blade arms swept forward in a killing arc, meant to cut her in half. But Maya was already moving. She dropped low and shifted to the left, letting his momentum carry him past her. The energy blade missed her head by inches, close enough that she felt the heat against her skin. The attacker stumbled slightly, surprised by her speed. He spun around, mandibles clicking in anger. His 2 companions circled wider, trying to flank her from both sides. Maya's mind worked faster than her body. Years of training had taught her to see beyond the surface, to find weaknesses that others missed. She watched the way the Kryn moved, studied their bodies with a fighter's eye. They were tall and powerful, that was obvious. Their exoskeletons looked impenetrable like walking tanks. But armor always had weak points. She could see the joints between their thorax and abdomen segments, places where the chitinous plates had to flex and separate to allow movement. The compound eyes gave them wide vision, but she noticed they had blind spots directly above their heads. More importantly, they were top-heavy. All that armor and those massive blade arms meant their center of gravity was high. They moved with confidence but not balance. They had probably never faced an opponent who could exploit that weakness. A memory flashed through Maya's mind. She was back at Marine Corps training, 5 years younger, standing on a mat in front of her instructor. Sergeant Andrew Walsh was a broad man with scarred knuckles and a patient voice. "Every opponent has leverage points," he had told her class. "Doesn't matter if they're bigger, stronger, or better armed. Physics doesn't care about any of that. You find the balance, you control the fight. A small person who understands leverage can drop someone twice their size." She had spent thousands of hours since then learning how to make that truth work. Judo throws on mats. Wrestling matches against larger opponents. Submission grappling until her muscles screamed. Boxing drills until her knuckles bled through the tape. Not because she loved violence but because she understood something fundamental. The human body, despite having no claws or venom or natural weapons, was one of the most adaptable fighting systems in nature when properly trained. The second attacker lunged at her from the right. Maya saw the attack coming, read his weight shift before he even moved. She waited until the last possible moment, then executed a perfect sidestep. As the Crin's blade swept past her, she grabbed his wrist joint where the blade met the forearm. The chitin was smooth but not frictionless. She had just enough grip. Using his own forward momentum, she pulled and rotated her hips. The Crin's eyes went wide with shock as he felt himself being redirected. Maya dropped her weight and turned, executing a technique called Taio Toshi, a body drop throw that used an opponent's force against them. The massive warrior flipped over her hip and crashed onto the floor with a sound like a car accident. The impact was so hard that cracks spiderwebbed across the polished station floor. He lay there stunned, his breathing spiracles gasping for air. 2 seconds had passed. The other 2 attackers stared in disbelief. Around the hall, delegates who had been watching in horror now watched in confusion. How had the small human just thrown a creature 3 times her size? Impossible, the lead Crin hissed. You have no strength. I don't need strength, Maya said. She was breathing steady, her heart rate barely elevated. I have leverage. The lead attacker roared and charged again, this time more cautious. His companion attacked from the left simultaneously, trying to overwhelm her with numbers. Maya's training took over completely. She stopped thinking and started reacting. The third attacker swung his blade arm in a horizontal slash. Maya ducked under it and moved inside his reach, where the long blades couldn't angle to cut her. She grabbed his arm at the elbow joint and twisted hard, applying an Aikido-style lock that hyperextended the joint backwards against its natural range of motion. The Crin screamed. The sound was inhuman, a high-pitched chittering that hurt Maya's ears. But she didn't let go. Instead, she used his body as a pivot point, spinning him around to face the lead attacker. The leader had to abort his charge to avoid impaling his companion. In that moment of hesitation, Maya swept the third attacker's legs. His knees buckled and he dropped forward. Maya rode him down, transitioning smoothly into a rear control position. But a Crin didn't have a neck like a human. She adapted instantly, wrapping her arm around the vulnerable breathing spiracles on the side of his thorax and applying pressure. The Crin thrashed wildly, his blade arms flailing. But Maya had positioned herself perfectly in his blind spot, right between his shoulder blades where his compound eyes couldn't see and his arms couldn't reach. She squeezed harder. The breathing spiracles collapsed under the pressure. The attacker's movements became weaker, more desperate. 5 seconds total had passed. The lead Crin stood alone now, both his companions disabled. One was still on the ground trying to recover from having the wind knocked out of him. The other was going limp in Maya's chokehold. She released him and he slumped forward, unconscious but alive. Maya stood up slowly, her uniform barely wrinkled. She looked at the lead attacker and waited. Around the conference hall, complete silence had fallen. 300 delegates from 40 different species watched with their mouths open, their eyes wide, their breathing stopped. The Vrexian security forces had finally recovered and were moving into position, but they made no move to intervene. They wanted to see what happened next. Ambassador Pierce stood near the back wall, one hand covering his mouth in shock. Next to him, the Crin delegate with red markings who had mocked Maya earlier now looked at her with what might have been fear or respect or both. The lead attacker's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound that Maya's translator struggled to interpret. Rage, confusion, shame all mixed together. He looked at his fallen companions, then back at Maya. "What are you?" he demanded. "What kind of warrior fights without weapons? What kind of species trains to destroy others with bare hands?" Maya's expression didn't change. The kind that survived on a death world by learning to use everything as a weapon, including our own bodies. The kind that turned fighting into science and art. The kind that has been grappling with each other for sport and survival for 50,000 years. She took a step forward. The Crin actually took a step back. "Your people are strong," Maya continued. "Your natural weapons are impressive. But you've relied on them for so long that you forgot how to actually fight. You never had to learn leverage or timing, or how to use an opponent's strength against them. You just swing your blades and expect everyone to fall." The lead attacker's blade arms trembled slightly. Maya could see him calculating odds, trying to decide if his pride was worth the risk. "Put down your weapons," Maya said. "This is over." The Crin looked around the hall. Every eye was on him. Every species that had ever dismissed humans as weak without their technology now watched a single human woman who had dismantled 2 armored warriors in seconds. He lowered his blade arms slowly, then raised them again in defiance. "No," he hissed. "I will not be defeated by a weak species. I will not bring shame to my people." He charged forward with everything he had, both blade arms raised high for a devastating downward strike. Maya set her feet and prepared to meet him. The lead Kryn warrior brought both blade arms down with enough force to cut through steel. Maya didn't try to block. Instead, she stepped forward into the attack, closer than any sane person would move toward a descending blade. The timing had to be perfect. 1 millisecond too slow and she would be cut in half. She slipped inside his reach just as the blades came down. They passed harmlessly on either side of her body, so close that she felt the hum of energy against her ribs. Before the Kryn could react, Maya grabbed his right arm with both hands, her fingers finding the joint where his blade met his forearm. She dropped her weight suddenly, pulling him forward and down. His own downward momentum worked against him. At the same time, she pivoted on her left foot and swept his lead leg with her right. The combination was devastating. 7 feet of armored warrior suddenly had nothing beneath him. The Kryn crashed face-first into the floor with a thunderous impact that shook the entire section of the hall. Maya didn't let go of his arm. She transitioned smoothly, dropping her knee into the gap between his thorax armor plates. The vulnerable joint compressed under her weight and the warrior's breathing spiracles gasped in pain. 3.4 seconds. That was all it had taken. The first attacker was still struggling to stand from her initial throw. The second was unconscious on the floor. The third, their leader, now lay pinned beneath her knee with his arm locked at an impossible angle. Maya reached to her belt and pulled out 3 magnetic restraint cables. They were considered non-weapons by the security protocols, just simple restraints. She had kept them when everything else was confiscated. Now she was grateful for that foresight. She secured the lead attacker's blade arms first, pulling them behind his back and binding them with quick, efficient movements. He tried to struggle but his position gave him no leverage. Every time he moved, Maya applied more pressure to the joint between his armor plates and he stopped immediately. The first attacker was finally getting to his feet, still dazed from being thrown. Maya was on him before he could fully stand. She swept his legs again, this time from behind, and he went down hard for a second time. Another restraint cable secured his arms. He made one weak attempt to resist but Maya pressed her thumb into a pressure point near his shoulder joint and he went still with a click of pain. The second attacker was still unconscious but breathing. Maya rolled him onto his front and secured him as well. All 3 restraint cables had small lights that glowed green, indicating they were locked and active. The Kryn warriors were completely immobilized. The entire conference hall remained frozen in absolute silence. 300 beings from 40 different worlds stood or sat or floated without moving, without speaking, barely breathing. Their eyes were fixed on the small human woman standing among 3 defeated Kryn warriors. Maya stood up slowly and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Her breathing was slightly elevated but not labored. Her uniform had a small tear on one sleeve but was otherwise intact. She looked calm, almost bored, as if she had just finished a routine training exercise rather than defeating 3 armed attackers. The Vrexian security chief was the first to move. He approached carefully, his eyes wide with shock, his scaled face showing an expression Maya had never seen on a Vrexian before. It might have been fear or awe or both. How? He started then stopped. His forked tongue flicked out nervously. How did you do that? Maya looked at him. Training. Humans have been developing unarmed combat systems for thousands of years. We call them martial arts. Judo, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing, and dozens of other styles. We practice them for sport, for meditation, and for military applications. When you spend your whole evolutionary history without claws or venom, you learn to fight smart instead of hard. The security chief looked down at the restrained Kryn. But they are so much stronger than you. Their armor, their natural weapons. Strength doesn't matter if you can't use it, Maya said. They're top-heavy so they're easy to throw. Their joints have the same mechanical limits as anyone else's, so locks work fine. Their breathing spiracles are exposed so chokes are effective. Every body has weaknesses. You just have to know where to look. Ambassador Pierce finally found his voice. He walked forward on shaking legs, his face still pale. Maya, that was... I've never seen anything like that. Just doing my job, sir. One of the smaller delegates, an insect-like being from a species Maya didn't recognize, raised a tentative appendage. But the security protocols took all weapons. We thought humans would be defenseless without their technology. Maya's expression didn't change. My body is the weapon. Everything else is just tools. Around the hall, beings began to murmur among themselves. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a mixture of fear and fascination. Several delegates were recording the aftermath on their devices. Others were speaking rapidly into communication equipment, clearly reporting what they had witnessed. The Kryn delegate with red markings who had mocked Maya earlier approached slowly. His compound eyes studied her with new intensity. When he spoke, his clicking voice was quiet, almost respectful. "I insulted you," he said. "I called your species weak. I was wrong." Maya nodded once. "You weren't completely wrong. Humans are weaker than Kryn in raw strength. We have no natural armor, no blade arms. But we're adaptable. We learn. We turn our weaknesses into different kinds of strength." The delegate was silent for a moment. "Will they live?" he asked, gesturing to the 3 restrained attackers. "Yes. I use control, not damage. They'll have some bruises and hurt pride, but nothing permanent. You could have killed them." "I could have," Maya agreed. "But that wasn't necessary. The goal was to stop the threat, not to create more violence." The Vrexian security forces finally moved in to take custody of the prisoners. They lifted the 3 Kryn carefully, treating them with newfound wariness even though they were fully restrained. As they carried the attackers away, the lead Kryn raised his head slightly to look at Maya. "What is your name, human?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Lieutenant Maya Torres." "I will remember that name," he said. "When I tell my people what happened here, they will not believe me. But I will remember." The security forces took him away. Maya turned to find dozens of cameras pointed at her. News reporters from multiple species were recording, their devices capturing every angle of the scene. The footage would spread across the coalition networks within hours. Ambassador Pierce put a hand on her shoulder. "Maya, this is going to change everything. Every species in the galaxy just watched you take down 3 armed Kryn warriors with your bare hands in less than 4 seconds. Do you understand what that means?" Maya looked around at the staring faces, the pointing appendages, the whispered conversations. She saw fear in some eyes, respect in others, and calculation in quite a few. The galactic community's understanding of humanity had just shifted dramatically. "It means we're going to have some difficult conversations ahead," she said quietly. On every device in the conference hall, on screens across Nexus 7, and soon on displays throughout Coalition space, the footage began to play on repeat. A small human woman facing 3 towering warriors. The blur of motion. The sound of impacts. 3 armored bodies on the ground in the time it took most beings to blink. The video counter showed 3.4 seconds. But those 3.4 seconds would echo across the galaxy for years to come. The Galactic Security Council chambers were different from the open conference hall. This room was smaller, more formal, with curved walls that seemed to absorb sound. 12 council members sat in a semicircle on elevated platforms, representing the most powerful species in the coalition. Maya stood in the center of the room, alone under bright lights that made her feel like a specimen under examination. The footage had spread even faster than Ambassador Pierce predicted. Within 6 hours, every major news network across Coalition space was showing the same clip. Maya dropping 3 Kryn warriors in seconds. The video had been watched billions of times. Analyzed frame by frame. Discussed in languages from 1,000 different worlds. Some called her a hero. Others called her dangerous. Many simply didn't know what to think. The council chairman, an elderly Quellan named Council Member 7, raised one of his 4 hands for silence. The murmuring in the observation gallery above stopped immediately. "Lieutenant Torres," he began, his voice tired but firm. 3 days ago you engaged and defeated 3 armed attackers at the diplomatic summit. Your actions saved lives and prevented a hostage situation. For this, the council thanks you. Maya nodded but said nothing. She could feel the butt coming. "However," Council Member 7 continued, "your display has created significant concern throughout the coalition. Many species are now questioning what they understand about human capabilities. Some are afraid. Others are demanding explanations. The council needs to understand exactly what we witnessed." A Vrexian council member leaned forward, his scales catching the light. The attackers were fully grown Kryn warriors. Elite specimens of their species. They had natural weapons that can cut through armored plating. How did you defeat them without any weapons of your own? Maya took a breath. She had prepared for this question. "I used techniques from human martial arts. Combat systems that my species has developed over thousands of years." "Martial arts," a council member from the floating Eric species repeated, as if testing the words. "We have no translation for this term in our language." "Explain." "On Earth, humans have always fought each other," Maya began. "Not just in wars but in sport, in ritual, in training. We had no claws, no venom, no natural armor. So we learned to use our bodies as weapons. We studied leverage and balance. We discovered pressure points and joint locks. We created systems of fighting that could let a smaller person defeat a larger one. She paused, choosing her words carefully. These systems became formalized into what we call martial arts. Judo focuses on throws and takedowns. Jiu-jitsu specializes in ground fighting and submissions. Boxing teaches striking with fists. Wrestling emphasizes control and pins. Muay Thai uses knees and elbows. There are dozens of others, each with different philosophies and techniques. And you know all of these systems? Asked an insectoid council member with suspicion in her multifaceted eyes. I know several well enough to teach them. Most human soldiers learn at least basic hand-to-hand combat. Some of us specialize. I spent 12 years training in various martial arts before joining the military, then another 5 years as a combat instructor. Council Member 7 leaned back in his seat. 17 years of training to fight without weapons. This is common among humans? Not to my level, Maya admitted. But millions of humans practice martial arts recreationally. Children learn them for discipline and confidence. Adults practice them for fitness and self-defense. Athletes compete in them for sport. It's deeply embedded in our culture. The chamber fell silent. Maya could see the council members exchanging glances, their various appendages moving in gestures of concern or confusion. A council member from the crystalline shardborn species spoke next, his voice like wind chimes. We have reviewed the footage extensively. The techniques you used would work against most species, not just Kryn. The principles of leverage and joint manipulation are universal across carbon-based life forms. That's correct, Maya said. The basic physics work on any opponent with joints and a center of gravity. Then every human is potentially a lethal threat in close quarters, even without weapons. Maya hesitated. She wanted to deny it, but the truth was more complicated. Any human with proper training could be dangerous, yes. But so could any Vrexian with their claws, or any Kryn with their blades, or any species with natural weapons. The difference is that humans had to learn our combat abilities. They're not built into our bodies. That makes it worse, snapped a reptilian council member. Natural weapons are visible. We can see a Kryn's blades or a Vrexian's claws. We know the threat. But humans look harmless. You look small and soft. There's no way to tell if a human is trained in these martial arts or not. The observation gallery above erupted in noise. Delegates shouted agreements or objections. Maya heard fear in their voices and something else. Anger, perhaps, at feeling deceived. Council Member 7 called for silence again. It took longer this time. Lieutenant Torres, he said seriously, the coalition has existed for 300 years on principles of transparency and mutual understanding. We have welcomed humanity as members because you brought technological innovation and diplomatic skills. But this revelation changes things. You have capabilities that were not disclosed during the integration process. With respect, Council Member, nobody asked, Maya said firmly. Humans never hit our martial arts. We have tournaments broadcast publicly. We teach self-defense classes. We include hand-to-hand combat in our military training manuals. All of this information was available. The coalition simply never looked. Because we assumed humans were like other species, said the Eric's council member. We assumed that without weapons you would be vulnerable like we are. We did not imagine that any species would spend thousands of years learning to kill with their bare hands. We don't just learn to kill, Maya protested. Martial arts teach discipline, respect, and control. Most practitioners never use their skills in real combat. It's about self-improvement and personal growth. Yet when needed, those skills are lethal, the Shardborn Council member observed. This is the concern. Ambassador Gerald Pierce stood from the observer section and requested permission to speak. Council Member 7 granted it with a wave of one hand. The coalition is afraid, Gerald said bluntly. I understand that. But consider this, the reason Lieutenant Torres could stop those attackers so efficiently is because she had years of training in controlled environments. She knew exactly how much force to use. She disabled the threats without killing them. An untrained person in that situation might have panicked, might have used excessive force, might have caused deaths. Training creates control, not danger. The council members conferred among themselves in hushed tones. Maya watched their body language, trying to read the decision that was forming. She saw doubt, concern, and calculation. Finally, Council Member 7 spoke again. The council has reached a preliminary decision. We will present two options to the human delegation. First option, humans agree to teach hand-to-hand combat techniques to coalition security forces. You will establish training programs across multiple stations and share your martial knowledge freely. This will level the playing field and remove the advantage you currently possess. He paused, his old eyes serious. Second option, if humans refuse to share this knowledge, the Council will implement restrictions. Human movement in coalition space will be monitored more closely. Security protocols will be adjusted to account for your unarmed combat capabilities. You will be treated as potential threats until we can develop appropriate countermeasures. Maya felt her stomach drop. You're asking us to choose between giving up our martial arts knowledge or being treated like criminals? We are asking you to choose between cooperation and isolation, Council Member 7 said softly. The galaxy has just learned that humans are far more dangerous than we believed. Trust must be rebuilt. The question is how? Ambassador Pierce looked at Maya. She looked back at him. Neither spoke, but both understood the weight of the decision. The entire galaxy was waiting for humanity's answer. 6 months had passed since the Council's ultimatum. Maya stood at the edge of Training Hall 4 on Nexus 7, watching her students warm up. The space had been converted from a cargo bay into a proper training facility, with padded floors, mirrored walls, and equipment designed to accommodate different body types and sizes. Her class today included 12 students from 8 different species. A sight that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. 2 Vrexian security officers practiced breakfall techniques in one corner, their scaled bodies hitting the mats with heavy thuds. A young Quellan named Vera worked on footwork drills, her 4 arms moving in patterns that Maya had adapted specifically for her physiology. 3 Kryn warriors, sent by their government as a gesture of reconciliation, ran through joint lock exercises with surprising gentleness. The most unexpected student was a small Eryx named Drift, a floating species that had no legs at all. Maya had spent weeks figuring out how to teach grappling techniques to someone who didn't touch the ground. The solution involved modified holds that worked in 3 dimensions rather than 2. "All right, everyone, gather up," Maya called out. The students stopped their exercises and formed a semicircle around her. 6 months ago, most of these beings would have looked at her with fear or suspicion. Now they looked at her with respect and eagerness to learn. "Today we're going to work on adaptive techniques," Maya said. "One of the most important lessons in martial arts is that there's no single perfect technique. You have to adapt to your opponent, to the situation, to your own body's strengths and limitations." She gestured to one of the Vrexian students, a female officer named Kess. "Kess, you're much stronger than I am. If we grapple using pure strength, you win every time. So when I face someone like you, I use what? Leverage and timing," Kess answered, her forked tongue flicking with pride. She had been one of the skeptical students at first, convinced that human techniques wouldn't work for Vrexian anatomy. Now she was one of Maya's best students. "Exactly. Now demonstrate the hip throw we learned last week, but use Terry as your partner." Terry was one of the Kryn warriors, tall and armored as all his species were. Kess approached him carefully, then executed a smooth throw that sent the much larger Kryn tumbling over her hip to land on the mat. Terry slapped the ground with one blade arm to absorb the impact, just as Maya had taught him. The class applauded with various appendages. Even after 6 months, seeing a Vrexian throw a Kryn still impressed them. "Good," Maya said. "Terry, how did that feel?" Terry stood up and brushed himself off. "Controlled. 6 months ago, if someone had told me a Vrexian half my size could throw me like that, I would have challenged them to try. Now I understand. It's not about size. It's about using the right technique at the right moment." Maya nodded. "That's the heart of what we're teaching here. Every species has advantages. Kryn have strength and natural weapons. Vrexians have speed and reflexes. Quellans have multiple limbs for complex holds. Eryx have 3-dimensional mobility. Humans have adaptability and thousands of years of refined technique. When we share knowledge, we all become better." She paired the students up for sparring practice, making sure to mix species so they would learn to work with different body types. As they began their controlled matches, Maya walked between them, offering corrections and encouragement. Drift floated past, attempting a submission hold on a Quellan partner. The technique was awkward but improving. Maya helped adjust the positioning, showing Drift how to use air pressure and momentum instead of ground leverage. "I never thought I could grapple," Drift said in his wind chime voice. "My people have no tradition of physical combat. We always relied on technology and distance weapons." "Everyone can learn," Maya said. "It just takes patience and willingness to adapt." A chime sounded, indicating someone at the training hall entrance. Maya looked up to see Ambassador Gerald Pierce walking in, accompanied by a Kryn she didn't recognize. The Kryn wore elaborate markings that indicated high rank. Maya called a break and approached them. Gerald smiled warmly. Maya, this is War Leader Thax from the Kryn home world. He wanted to see the training program himself. War Leader Thax studied the room with his compound eyes, taking in the sight of his people training alongside former adversaries. I came to see if the reports were true, he said, his clicking voice thoughtful. Our people told us that Kryn warriors were learning to fight from humans. Many on our world considered this shameful. We are natural warriors. What could we learn from species without claws or armor? He watched Terry executing a perfect armbar on a willing Vrexian partner. But I see now. What you teach is not about replacing our strengths. You teach us to refine them. To use strategy instead of just power. That's exactly right, Maya said. Your warriors are formidable. This training makes them more complete fighters. Thax turned to her. My government wishes to establish a training center on our home world. We want human instructors to teach our military forces. Will you help us arrange this? Maya glanced at Gerald, who nodded encouragingly. I'll need to discuss it with my superiors, but yes, I think that can be arranged. As Thax wandered off to observe the students more closely, Gerald pulled Maya aside. It's not just the Kryn. 17 species have requested human combat instructors in the last month. The Vrexian Home Guard wants to establish a permanent academy. The Quellan peacekeeping forces are completely restructuring their training based on your methods. That's a lot of demand, Maya said, watching her students practice. We'll need more instructors. They're already being recruited. The Marine Corps is setting up a specialized training program. By next year, there will be over 200 human martial arts instructors working across coalition space. Maya felt a strange mixture of pride and responsibility. You know what's interesting? The council was afraid that our martial arts made us dangerous. But teaching them has done the opposite. We're more integrated with the coalition now than ever before. Shared knowledge builds trust, Gerald agreed. Who would have thought that the thing that scared them most about us would become the thing that brings us closer together? Across the training hall, Kes successfully defended against a Kryn attack and countered with a submission hold. Both fighters were careful, controlled, showing respect for each other despite their species' historical tensions. When the match ended, they helped each other up and discussed what worked and what didn't. Vera approached Maya with one of her 4 hands raised. Instructor Torres, I've been working on that spinning technique you showed me. Could you check my form? Of course. Maya walked over to review the Quellan's progress, offering small adjustments to her stance and rotation. Later that evening, after the class had ended and the students had left, Maya sat alone in the training hall. She thought about the 3 Kryn attackers from 6 months ago, the ones who had started all of this. They were in coalition custody now, serving sentences for their attack. But Maya had received a message from one of them last week. The lead attacker, the one who had charged her with such certainty, had written to thank her. Thank her for not killing him when she could have. Thank her for showing his people that strength alone wasn't enough. He was teaching other prisoners basic martial arts principles now, using what he had learned from being defeated. Violence had created understanding. Combat had built bridges. It seemed contradictory, but Maya was beginning to understand a deeper truth. Martial arts weren't really about fighting. They were about respect, discipline, and the recognition that every opponent had something to teach you. Her communicator buzzed. It was Colonel Frank Reeves from Earth. Torres, how's the academy going? Better than expected, sir. We've got students from 8 species now, with 3 more requesting enrollment next month. Good. Because the Coalition Council just approved funding for 10 more training centers. They want you to help design the curriculum for all of them. Maya looked around the empty training hall, at the mats where beings from across the galaxy came to learn from each other. Understood, sir. I'll get started on the plans. One more thing, Frank said. The Council is establishing an official position. Director of Interspecies Combat Training. They want to offer it to you. You'd be responsible for overseeing all martial arts instruction across coalition space. Maya was quiet for a moment. A year ago, she was just a military attaché at a diplomatic summit. Now they wanted her to reshape how the entire galaxy thought about combat and training. Can I think about it? She asked. Take your time. You've earned it. After the call ended, Maya walked to the center of the training mat. She dropped into a ready stance, practicing the same basic movements she had learned as a child. The fundamentals never changed, no matter how complex the situation became. Through the windows she could see Nexus 7 stretching out in all directions, and beyond that, the stars of coalition space. Somewhere out there, human instructors were teaching Vrexians how to use leverage. Quellan peacekeepers were learning submissions. Kryn warriors were discovering the value of technique over raw power. The galaxy was learning that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or firepower. It was the ability to adapt, to learn, and most importantly, to teach. By sharing what made them seem dangerous, humans had become indispensable. Maya smiled and continued her practice, alone but not lonely, knowing that across 1,000 worlds, others were doing the same.